Okay, well, I am very excited for this next part. We have, I think we talk about geographical representation. We didn't anticipate to represent this particular part of geography, but all the way from Australia, we have our second keynote speaker, Ricky Sutton, who will be joined on stage by Rideau Hall Foundation CEO and President, Teresa Marquez. So it is my pleasure to invite them both to the stage to get this party started. Please welcome Teresa and Ricky.
Morning all.
Good morning. Oh, that's working. Let's get comfortable. So, Ricky, we're so excited to have you here today. And as Jill said, you've come from away. I think you know there's maybe only Stacy from Haida Gwaii News that had a comparably sort of long distance to travel. So thank you for being here. We're also really pleased that you've had a couple days to spend with this whole group. And I know you've had lots of conversations, and you've had the chance to probably learn a bit more about the challenges that folks are facing in their communities, as well as the really innovative solutions that they are driving, again, in community. And I think, for me, one takeaway of many is that this is a room that really knows kind of how to hustle and get things done. So for the next little while, I would love your perspective on kind of what you're seeing around the world related to local news, the evolution of what's happening in tech, and kind of where those two areas meet, and how it reflects with what you've been hearing and seeing today over the past couple days. But before we do that, I think it'd be valuable for people to hear just a bit more about your own journey. So, you know, you started as a local reporter, you moved on to be head of news in Britain's largest paper, the first head of digital, then you moved more explicitly kind of into the tech space. You were the head of a startup, an enormously successful startup in tech and AI. And now you're advising executives through Future Media. So tell us more about that journey and kind of how it connects with where you are today.
Thanks. Hello everybody. I've really enjoyed chatting to so many of you already, so awesome. And don't be shy about jumping up and asking questions during this as well, okay? So, no, my journey's a bit of a strange one. I always wanted to be a journo from when I was 12 years old. I wanted to be a war correspondent. And so I left home at 16. I persuaded the local council to give me a grant to go train. I did that. I worked on hyper-local papers. There's a little paper in Bath in England that had 12,000 readers, and I worked there and I loved it. And then there was a war in the Balkans, and I could drive to it. Like, there aren't many wars you can drive to, so I got to be a war correspondent in my late teens, which was really exciting. And that's what gave me my career in national media in the UK. But about 2002, 2003, I could see that technology was rising in value incredibly quickly, and our industry was just starting to hit the buffers. There were just some clues. And so I quit media, or print media, and went to work at Microsoft on the launch of Bing, the search engine. I wanted to learn tech because I figured if I could understand, I already understood media, but if I could understand tech as well, maybe I could act as a bridge for what was going to be what I believed a clash. Most people thought it was going to be a friendship and a love-in. I thought it was going to be a clash, and I thought we'd better work out what both sides want from that. And so for the past 20 years, that's been my job, is to act as an interpreter between tech and media.
And I think, based on what you've been hearing and seeing outside of Canada, how does it connect to like what might be some real innovations that you've been seeing related to local media?
Well, if I'm very honest, and apologies to anybody from tech that's here, it's been a one-way traffic, and it's not gone our way. I don't know if you guys are all feeling enormously successful and everything's great, but it doesn't feel like that, Russ. It feels a bit like we're a football team that lost every Saturday for the last 20 years. And so it's been a one-way traffic towards tech. And that's partly our fault. It's partly their fault. But whichever way you look at it, they've been the winner, okay? And so today in this conversation, what I'm really looking forward to doing is taking you through some of the details of that, why it happened, very briefly, because that's the past. But what we really need to focus on is what's coming next, which is massive changes coming down the pipe on tech. Their era is sunsetting, okay? And then we, as the industry, have to know what to do next. We're about to win the war. Now we need to win the peace, okay? And so that we're going to get opportunities. All of us in here, the nightmares are going to turn into dreams, and we're going to get a chance to do stuff. So I want to talk about that a little bit.
I think it'd be great if you could take that a little bit further now. So imagining a world that is maybe not that distant, where kind of the prevalence or role of big tech in this space changes. What does that mean for kind of the vacuum, if I can use that term?
Yeah.
And who fills that gap? Is it a multitude of voices and perspectives? Is it something else? And what's the opportunity for people kind of in this room?
Okay. So how many of you know this frenemy, enemy? Frenemy, is that a phrase that you guys use here?
Frenemy is a word, yeah.
Okay, all right. So back in the late 90s, early 2000s, Google was a friend. It was going to grow our traffic. It was going to give us access to new audiences, and that was amazing. And then they bought DoubleClick and became an advertising company, and they kind of became a frenemy. We were reliant on them for distribution and for monetization. And then they stopped the distribution and stopped the monetization and started to cinch it, and then they became enemy. And it became inevitable to me that that was going to lead to antitrust, which is an incredibly boring part of the law, until it impacts on whether you guys can pay your mortgage. Then it becomes suddenly really, really interesting and important. And so we've just had a situation in North America where Google's faced 3 antitrust cases in very short succession. And they lost the first one around their App Store, which means they can't charge you huge fees to use the App Store. They've just lost the search antitrust trial, which means that they bought their dominance by paying tens of billions of dollars to their rivals to own all of global search, which then gave them all of the data they needed to be the dominant advertising business in the world. So Google isn't a search engine, it's an ad business. 87% of its revenue comes from advertising, and that advertising used to be yours. Lisa? Yeah. So, yeah, right. So this has been a shakedown to get to the advertising money of the publishing industry, disguised as some other thing, okay? And now it's been called by the US government, and they've lost that case as well. And then there's been a third one, which is the ad tech antitrust trial. So how many of you in here use Google Ad Manager as your ad server? Okay. So across the world, 96% of publishers use Google's ad server to deliver their ads. So they're not in control of distribution, they're not in control of monetization, they're not in control of data, they don't have an audience, it's actually Google's audience. And this has been very difficult to disentangle until the Department of Justice of the US government decides to break them up, because you can't really argue with that. The funny thing about laws is that they impact on everyone, no matter how big or strong you are. And so it's starting to break them up. And so just the other day, I know this all seems like super high in the sky, but all of this is going to impact on all of you every day, okay? So the government has now said, okay, we're not having this. And the Department of Justice has asked for a breakup. And some of the things that they're talking about, and this there's 100 things they've asked for, but the ones that you people in this room have asked me about in the last 2 days is that, number one, Google's search engine secret source, how it works, yeah, is going to be made public. So anyone can build a search engine. That's competition. Imagine you're McDonald's and they take away the Big Mac sauce and give it to Burger King, right? This is what's about to happen. It's going to be super exciting. The second thing is that they're probably going to be forced to spin off Android, right? Can't be used as another part of their dominant business. That has to be separated. And various other parts of the business. And copyright and AI, right? So I've been asked about that constantly the last couple of days. In the demands from the Department of Justice is a call that Google cannot, all right, let's go back a step. If you guys don't want your content to be used to train Google's AI. If you want to retain the copyright of your own content, you want to sell it to them, okay? Google will say to you, if you ring them today, they'll say, that's fine, you can just turn off the robots.txt code on your website and it will disappear. We won't be able to see your website to train on it. But if they do that, you also disappear from Google search, right? This is a thing in antitrust that's called tying. You make two things reliant on each other, and if you've got one, you get both, and if you don't have one, you don't have any of it. It's not very nice. It's a bit of a shakedown. And so in the request from the Department of Justice is a change that says that you're entirely allowed to say absolutely not to AI and absolutely yes to search. Disaster for Google, great for you, because that will open a world where they can't access your content if you don't give it to them. And if they do want it, and if they really feel they need it, then you're going to charge them for it, okay? And so copyright is now being addressed by this antitrust action as well. So while it seems very big and very far away and not anything that impacts on you at all, and it's all happening in a court with $2,000 an hour lawyers, all of it is going to come back and impact on you, because this advertising money, $821 billion, okay, is about to be socialized and made available to all of you again after 20 years of slowly being taken away. And that's a game changer.
Thank you for unpacking that in a bit more detail. What else can local media and journalism do to be ready for this kind of shift?
Right, and this is the really big point, is that I speak a lot at events just like this all around the world, and until about 18 months ago, there was a real mood of doom in the room. It felt like people were just clinging on to try and get to the next bit. And there wasn't that kind of joie de vivre that I feel from journalism. There wasn't that, let's just go and smash it and do this thing, right? People weren't really giving me that impression. And I said to them, look, for the last 15 years, you've woken up at 4:30 a.m. in the morning with the night terrors trying to figure out how you're going to keep the lights on and not lay off some more people. You might just have an opportunity now to dare to dream, where you might actually wake up at 4:30 and go, do you know what, tomorrow I am going to do that, and I am going to take that risk and hire that person. And these changes that are happening now with antitrust give us the opportunity to dream and to reimagine what it was like. So many of us in this room were working in media before Google. Okay, so the world was very different then. And for people born in the Google era, there seems to be only Google. But there was a life before Google, and there's going to be one after. And so we now have an opportunity to start to think about what we might do if, for example, Lisa succeeds and puts, the best part of $4 billion back into your economy. But then what happens if another $100 billion comes back into your economy because Google is stopped from cinching all the advertising money? Then there's money for you. That national advertising might start to come back. I think it will come back. And then you can start to do the things that you currently don't feel able to do. I heard your frustration when you were up here on the panel, all right? And if you get the opportunity to do things and be creative again, we can start to rebuild local media, which I care passionately about, just as you do. And so I think we're allowed to dream. And I know it's scary, but just give it a go, right? Because this is coming. I don't know how long it's going to take. Google's going to fight tooth and nail, right? And it's going to take years, and there's going to be appeals, and it's going to be a pain in the backside, right? But it will come. Okay, so just have enough energy. Just conserve enough energy to just do the good things afterwards as well.
We've been talking over the past couple of days sort of increasingly about sort of changing legislative frameworks in the US, in Canada. When it comes to sort of how policy reform can help to level the playing field, I'll say, in your perspective, are there jurisdictions that are getting this right that we should be looking to?
No one's nailed it yet. I'm from Australia. We had the first go with the News Media Bargaining Code. You guys were next. You guys have had a go as well. I don't think either of us would say that it's been a resounding success, but we have had the courage to give it a go, and everything is trial and error. So I think we're off and running, and there'll be refinements that we need to make. But you have to believe you can win against what appears to be an insurmountable enemy to even bother to try. And because antitrust has proven that Google can be vulnerable, then people are going to be a bit more courageous in the things that they do next. Somebody was asking me day before yesterday specifically about taxation. And certainly in Europe and in Australia, there's a conversation taking place that says that all government advertising, none of it can go to Google or to Meta. That the money, if it's funded by taxpayers, should be spent on tax domiciled countries in the country where the money is being spent. At the end of the day, taxation exists. I'm not an economist, but even I know that taxation exists to recirculate the riches of the country among the country so that people can benefit. If what you do is you take the money and you give it to a tech company that moves it to Ireland to pay low tax jurisdiction so they can then move it back into America, that doesn't benefit you, that doesn't build a hospital, that doesn't enable you to have better roads. It means that the money that you're putting in your taxation is leaving your country and heading to a monopoly offshore. That's a bad outcome, all right? And so I think that in taxation, certainly I'd be looking at government taxation first. I've got 100 different ideas around this that I've heard. We're not going to have time to talk about them all today. Happy to discuss afterwards. But just the main things that need to change are taxation, keeping it domestic. I would strongly advise that we have rules around copyright, but as I said, antitrust is now going to resolve that. Removing the monopolies, again, antitrust is resolving that. So really, the four things that were completely inconceivable even 2-3 years ago are now already happening. So the pace of change in tech, people talk about this a lot. You wait forever and ever and ever for the change to happen, and then it happens 10 times as fast as you thought. That's what we're seeing happen here.
I want to shift us a bit to the world of AI. Mm-hmm. And so just picking up on Steve Waldman's talk yesterday around the idea that AI-generated content is only accurate or valuable or useful based on volumes of data. And that, of course, is sort of a cyclical challenge, and it becomes much harder to do with less newsrooms presenting accurate, real content. So with this notion that AI is kind of disrupting everything, everywhere, all at once, all over the place, how would you respond to the idea of AI as kind of a potential to unlock growth for local news businesses, as opposed to being sort of an existential threat?
Yeah, so this is where I probably run in a slightly different direction to some of you, because I'm a strong believer in AI, and that I say that because I built an AI company 11 years ago. So if you went to a venture capitalist 8 years ago or 11 years ago and said, I'm going to build an AI company, they just looked at you like a loony. But we built a piece of tech. Think about this as a way to use AI to aid journalism. I was talking to you about it just the other day. So we wrote a piece of code that could read an article and identify what that article was about, in the same way as a search knows that this article is contextually relevant to the question you've just asked. So we wrote a version of that. It would read the article, identify what all the words were, and effectively change the article into a number with its contextuality in it, okay? And then on the other side of the equation, we knew that there were millions and millions and millions of videos being made by broadcasters around the world. So all of the Canadian broadcasters and wire services became customers of ours. We'd take all of this video and then we'd run the same analysis on the video. So we turn the video into a number. So if you were writing an article about climate change in your community, and you're writing the article in your content management system, your CMS, the tool, the business that we wrote called Uvu, would say, okay, I can see you're writing a story about climate change, and you're specifically talking about calving of the ice pack up here. Here's a video from the BBC from 4 minutes ago relating to this. Would you like it? Rights cleared to go in your article. And they were ready produced news clips from the BBC or from Canadian Press or from CBC, and you could use them, put them in your article to enhance the article for your readers, and then it would run an ad and that ad revenue that was generated would be kept by you and shared with the broadcaster with a small clip coming to us to solve the problem. But the video was never inserted in the page automatically by the AI. It was just surfaced and discovered and offered. It was for the reporter to say, yes, I like that one, and put it in the page. Or actually, I prefer that one, let's put that in the page. And every time you made a decision as a journalist which video was best, it taught the machine to know who to recommend the same thing to better next time. And when you were doing that 100 million times a day, which is where we got to, you were teaching a machine how to service journalists better. That's the opposite of what we're afraid of, okay? That's actually an opportunity, and we should be paid for that, for the work that we do. So we built this business, we made it very successful. I sold it last year. But AI doesn't have to be an enemy. AI can be an enabler, a tool, and a revenue generator for us. And so there are people that will try to turn it into an enemy. AI overviews, you guys may have seen this new ad search tool that's popping up, but it doesn't have to be, okay? So we need to learn the technology and make it work for us, not against us.
I want to take us to your current endeavor and the growing and significant newsletter that you have. And we were chatting about this yesterday, and you said that it began with I think the initial model was called Scotch and Watch.
It was,
right?
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about just what the newsletter has meant for Future Media, how it's grown, and what some of the sort of unanticipated consequences were?
Sure. So I do want to share this with you, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I'm going to do something that people don't normally do, which is I'm going to tell you exactly how much I earn and exactly how I earn it, because I think it's a model and an opportunity for some of you to pick some of these bits off. Okay, so I know people don't do this, but I think that we should share it. So when I sold Uvu, I was at a bit of a loose end. I couldn't decide what to do. And some of my friends, including some here at the Canadian Press and at the Toronto Star, said to me, can you please keep in touch? We want to ask you questions. We want to get advice from you around things around AI. Can we please not lose contact with each other just because we're not working together anymore? And so I live in Australia, which is very far away. And so the phone calls from the US and from Canada would land on my phone, normally about 10:30 at night while I was watching TV and drinking scotch. And so they normally got a coherent response, okay? But I said to them, look, you're all asking me the same questions and I'm giving you the same responses. Rather than just have 5 conversations every night, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write it down. I'm going to write it down in a newsletter, and then you guys can just go to the newsletter and find the answers that you're looking for, right? And so I called the newsletter Scotch and Watch for that reason. And there were 5 people. It was just for 5 friends, okay? And I did it on Substack. I don't know if anybody here is running a Substack, but I did it on Substack. And then I could see in the data that, there were 5 readers, and then there were 50, and then there were 500, and they were clearly sharing it with their friends, right? And so I'm writing down these little nuggets of stuff that I think is interesting, and it's just spreading like wildfire. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I seem to have cottoned onto something. So I changed the name from Scotch and Watch, because that was a little bit eclectic, and turned it into Future Media, and started to run there stuff that I thought would be useful for media people, media execs, to help navigate through this rapidly changing environment. And it really covers the collision of media and tech, because it is a collision today. I'm really hoping one day it can become a collaboration, but right now it's a collision, right? And we have to get past that. And so, yes, it's grown and grown and grown and grown and grown. So it has about 3,000 subscribers at the moment, across 640 media companies in 74 countries, and it's all organic. Several people have signed up actually just in the last couple of days from here. And so it just grows and grows and grows, right? So you think, all right, is it possible? This is where I ended up. This is what I really want to share with you guys. Can I feed my family with this thing? Can I earn a living, just me, writing about things I care passionately about for my mates? Can I make a living out of it? Is it possible? And so I assumed at the beginning that a certain number, well, actually, it started with one of the audience volunteered to pay, just made a completely ex gratia payment to the system and signed a subscription. I never asked for paid subscriptions. They just did it themselves. And then I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. Well, I'll turn on payments and see what happens. And then people thanked me for turning on payments and started to pay. Okay, so about 5% of them moved from being free to being paid. About 5%. That's the conversion rate. So I don't know if you guys want to write these numbers down, but I'm going to share all of them, and you can ask me separately if you want. So about 5% of free subscribers become paid subscribers in the newsletter. Okay. I thought that wasn't going to be enough money to pay for me and my expensive children. So it was, all right, what can I do next? And then people started to ring me and said, would you be willing to syndicate your newsletter to our newspaper, please? And we'll pay you to be allowed to feature one of your posts a week. Suddenly I've got 4 of those, and it's generating about $90,000 a year. $90,000, yeah. So you're like, okay, that's good. That's starting to get towards, something that's a little bit exciting here. I like it. And then I was approached by a sponsor who said, so you're writing your newsletter 3 times a week. There are 640 media companies represented worldwide, and 80% of them are C-suite executives. We can be in their inbox through a sponsorship. Would you take a sponsorship? Never occurred to me, right? I said, okay, well, what would you pay? And they said, we'll pay $10,000 US a month. And I'm like, the answer to that is yes. Okay, I can do that. And they said, do you have a mailing list that targets stories about Google? I said, no, I just have one that targets everyone. And they said, oh no, when you write about Google, we'll sponsor that. But if you write about Meta, we'll sponsor that as well. And if you write about somebody else, we'll write about that. And so I split off 4 different newsletters, each with a sponsor. Suddenly it's a media company, right? Being run from this office upstairs from a kid's toy shop across the road from my house. So starting to make some money, okay? So a newsletter isn't making its money from subscription. It's making its money from sponsorship, syndication, and subscription, all right? So that was interesting. Then I get a phone call from a US broadcaster who says, we like your snarky tone, Lisa, on the way that you're writing about this stuff. We like that. We think it would transfer really nicely into a podcast. So we're going to hire you to be a podcaster, and we'll help you make a weekly podcast, and we will salary you for that, and we'll pay you a revenue share. So it's $90,000 US to do it, and 50% revenue share on the ad revenue and sponsorship that comes from it. Okay, so all I'm doing is reading the article that I've just written with a little bit of post-production onto a tape for them to post-produce and then distribute. They do all the ad sales and everything else. So now I got another revenue stream. Then Netflix rang and said, we quite like this, and we want to make a slew of documentaries now about big tech. So I made one last year, $20,000 US, and then I've got 2 slated for next year, which are both $50,000. And all I'm doing is advising them on what to make. So you've got syndication, subscription, sponsorship, podcasting, and streaming, all from the newsletter. That's the seed, and then it grows from there. So I'm thinking, well, it can't get any bigger than this. And then I get a phone call from an agent who says, people are asking you to speak at events like this one. And they're all over the world. Would you like to do them? And I'm like, why not? Let's give it a go. And so now I do these, around the world, and that's now generated a revenue stream. And then, when I really thought we were done, I got a phone call from a global consulting company, one of those big, really boring, slack-wearing, backpack-type consulting companies. And they said to me, we've got a really successful media practice where we advise large media companies on things, and they all keep sending us your emails and your newsletter saying, we want to do that. And then we look into who our people are, and we don't have anybody in our team that knows about that stuff. So we thought we'd just hire you. What do you reckon? And so I said, I will not come and work for you as a consulting company, but I will sell you 2 days of my time. Okay? And I said, okay. And we negotiated, and they paid me $400,000 for 2 days because of a newsletter. Okay? Now, I'm not here to brag or explain this to you because it's awesome, which it is. But I'm here to tell you because a newsletter is more than subscription. It's a one-to-one direct personal conversation with your audience that people can't reach in any other way that's so personal, okay? And so emotional often, okay? And really connected. So the reason I've shared all of those numbers and that escalating opportunity is because there's only 3,000 people in this newsletter. But we know exactly who they are, and they're valuable, and people care. And so the newsletter is a model that enables anyone that wants to invest their time in writing highly targeted, deeply personal, important information for a very direct group. It's a real opportunity to open up significant revenue. So I'm sorry if it makes you awkward when I talk about the numbers, but it's because I think it's important to know, because none of our businesses survive without paying the bills. And so I just wanted to let you know all of that.
Thank you, and we're Canadian, so, talking about numbers is a bit...
It's awkward.
It's a bit awkward.
Super awkward.
But very, super, super interesting as well.
I hope so. No one left, so that was kind of okay.
And I think that the last thing that you mentioned in particular about, you said there's 3,000 subscribers now? That's very relevant to this room, I think. I mean, this audience is primarily focused on a community, a city, a region, a set number of people. So when you think about innovation and growth and scale, I would imagine that the goal is not necessarily going to be, multiplying numbers in terms of reach necessarily. So can you talk a little bit about what, and then I'll stop because I want to make sure that there's time for questions in the audience. But how do you innovate and be ready for this impending kind of shift if the goal is kind of depth, but maybe not breadth? And I could be wrong on that assumption.
I get asked so many times by publishers all the way from the Washington Post to a hyperlocal paper about what do we need to change. You don't need to change anything, right? Honestly, I don't think you do. I think that we've been taught to think that we're doing it wrong because the money doesn't exist, but that's not because you're doing something wrong, it's because Google is. All right? Yeah? And so, yeah, thanks. Well, that's a round of, it's a round of applause for you, right? So, I don't think you need to change anything. I just think you redouble your efforts and stay close to your community and tell them exactly what you do. It's all about relevance. You love them, they love you. The money's just been subverted, all right? So when it comes back, you'll be the most satisfied people in the world. But I will say this, right, which is the one real warning that I have, which is that I'll use this phrase all the time, so apologies if it's getting a bit hackneyed, but we're going to win the war. We have to win the peace. So what happens next? We have to be better than we were. And we have to recover fast, and we need to show the public that the breakup of these companies is being reflected in a better experience for them from you. That's why I want you to start to dream about what you can do, not what you can't, right? So I want you to think about that and just really think about how am I going to make what we do for the people we love 50% better on January 2nd. I would love to have that thought, because I can tell you this, when I started in journalism like 350 years ago or whatever it was, I woke up every morning just utterly thrilled with the idea, just like bouncing with enthusiasm to get into the office to write something and get my story out there. And when I saw my byline, it was like, come on, in the lift, That's exactly how I felt about it. Hasn't felt like that for a while. Let's give that back to us, to ourselves, but let's also give it to the next generation and the next generation and remind people about how awesome we are. Because that's why you clap, right? That's why you're joyous, right? So you're going to have the dream at 4:30, right? But I want everybody to, because we don't have to feel downtrodden or that we've lost, because that's over. Yeah? Celebrate the win.
I think that's a great note to turn to the audience on. So I'd really welcome questions that folks might have for Ricky. And feel free, the microphones are up, and you're welcome just to come forward. Yeah.
I love the joy. Like I said yesterday, nobody got into this business to get rich. I'm relieved to hear you're getting rich.
After many, many years
Yep.
of fallow existence.
And one of the things that I'm particularly heartened to hear about your optimism is rooted in is AI. And you mentioned a great way, I think, for people here to turn their text into video that accompanies them. And if we do this right, we might be able to jujitsu the notion of trust as well. Right now, nobody trusts AI. If it's used properly, we might actually be able to use it to enhance trust in us. So there are some other ways, I think you probably know them already, that people in this room could use AI to help them gather journalism. Just a couple. You can install some watermarks to find out whether a quote is accurate or not. You can use it to scroll through social media to find stories, legitimate stories. But it sounds like you've already mined this. Can you tell people some of those areas where they can use AI very inexpensively to enhance their journalism, where they don't have staff, they might not have the editorial help that they need as well? And if you can't tell us, you probably got a long list of places where we can go and find that.
No, I do. So just bear with me a minute, okay? Yeah, it's the only time in all of the years that I've done public speaking that I managed to get an audible gasp from an audience recently. So I'll tell you what I honestly think is about to happen. So we've had 25 years of media dominance, which ended in the early 2000s. We've had 25 years of tech dominance, big tech and search and social dominance, which is ending now, okay? These are eras, 25, there's going to be another 25, and that 25 is going to be AI, whether we like it or not. So what is that going to look like? So I believe that we're going to have a splinter net. I believe that we have the www today, which is Google's internet, which doesn't work for us. I think there's going to be loads of internets now, and there's going to be loads of search engines. So what I think we're going to see in the next year or two is a search engine built by and for the news industry that everybody that isn't a proper publisher is going to be locked out of. Right? And so if you take all of your publications and all of the trusted publications around the world, everyone that's a member of an industry group, everybody that pays tax, everybody that employs actual journalists, yeah, and we police that and we find a way to organize that, and the industry can coalesce in its own search engine, in its own separate internet that maybe has one subscription for the whole world, like a Netflix, and that all news that lives in there is trusted, and the AI taught by that is trusted. And Google can run its Wild West Web over here. That's what I think of the www is. It's the Wild West Web. It's yucky. It's disgusting. It's the horrible bottom of the market. It's the bottom feeder market. But over here is a premium market, which is publisher enabled. And that will enable us to both create the discovery, the distribution, the partnerships, the sharing, the AI that flows off that, the millions and millions of different apps, the ability for our industry to collaborate and work collectively using the best tech that exists to build a better web. So I actually think that the AI solution is something completely new, a new web. Now, there's a group of 15,000 global publishers that I'm a part of that's working on this at the moment. It's called AirGap, and I hope you'll hear more about it soon. But our view is that the open web, this one, the Wild West Web, that's polluted beyond rescue. It's full of AI-generated content, and you don't know which one is and which one isn't. You heard it talked about yesterday. I think that ends. And I think that the people that care about true information will go to a new one that just needs to be built. But we can do it now because we've got all Google's data, all Google's tech.
Any other questions? Yeah, Margot.
So Ricky, you've been with us for 2 days, and you've heard everybody's stories and what's going on here in Canada. And I asked you last night what you thought your greatest takeaway from these 2 days has been, and I liked your answer. I thought it was fascinating. So I was wondering if you could share it.
How many drinks have I had?
What's that?
How many drinks did I have? So what I'm seeing here and what I'm seeing around the world is a coming together, a collaboration of publishers who are all recognizing, no matter where they come from geographically, what language they speak, what they work on and what their political bents are, whether they're left or they're right or anything else, we all have the same challenges, okay? And we all have to sustain. So there was a phrase used yesterday by somebody on stage, I can't remember who it was, but it's a phrase I use a lot, plurality of media. That's what makes the media beautiful, is that you have multiple different shades to be able to, you might agree or disagree, that's okay, right? But you need to be able to get lots and lots of different viewpoints to become educated about what you believe and what you care about, right? And so a plurality of media means that we have to sustain all kinds of media, which means we all have to work together. So there are, I don't know, pick a number, 360,000 global publishers, something like that. And we all have the same pain point, which is there just isn't enough money for us to enable us to continue to grow and thrive. So if we come together as communities like this, and then this community pulls into a bigger one and a bigger one, like raindrops on a windscreen, eventually we'll have an industry that marches in one direction. We're not in competition with each other, and we haven't been for 20 years. Okay, and we all have the best opportunity now to coalesce to try and do something else. We can't build air gap unless publishers decide to march in the same direction. So we all have the same aims, albeit from different angles, but that's what I'm delighted about, and that's what I'm thrilled about here. It's the first time this has happened, right, in Canada? Yeah, so I recently brought all of South Africa's publishers together, the 5 major media companies in South Africa. They'd never met before. Right, it's happening, Margot, okay? And sometimes the fierce need is what's at the thing that breaks the barriers that have existed for a long time. We should have probably done this 10 years ago, but we're doing it now, and it's in time. So that's what I've really enjoyed here. Plus, you guys have been really polite and lovely, so I've really enjoyed that. No one's yet harangued. Somebody did actually shoulder barge me at an event recently who was a Google, big Google fan, gave me the shoulder as I was going out the door. So no, that hasn't happened here. I
Yet.
hope that'll
Hasn't
be okay.
happened yet.
Yeah, yet. Please.
Hi there. I just wanted to ask a couple questions about this. I forget, what is it called? The splinternet thing for the
Splinternet.
Well, no, actually more about the thing you're creating for
Air gap.
Pardon?
Air gap.
Okay. Am I correct in understanding, would it be free access for anybody to read it? Okay. And second, so that's the first question. And secondly, how are you going to decide who's a credible news organization to be a member? Because that's such a problem.
Fantastic question. So you're walking away, so I'm going to ask you a question. I can't, no, please, keep going. No, keep going. I don't want to stop you. When Mark Zuckerberg tells me, not personally, he's not on speed dial, but when he tells me in the newspaper, in an article or something, that he's figured out what's credible news and what's not, that lights a fire, right? My rage is palpable, like, fuck off. So he's not qualified to do that. And when he says it's really, really difficult to figure this out, it's like, really? Thanks so much for letting me know. It's like, they are the wrong people to try and be the people that control this. So when they say it can't be done, it can be done. They're just the wrong people, right? We can do it. You can do it. See you nodding, right, sagely. I bet you that.
We already do it. Commissioner awards judge will only take applications or entries that are in the public interest. And so we judge what's in the public interest. Some things are discarded.
Yeah. So when the tech companies say things like this, right, I go, do you know what I used to be? It was an editor. Let me explain to you what that is. Yeah? It was my decision to make these decisions that you can't make. So when they can't make the decision, did they ring you and ask for your help? Yeah? It's like I need to do brain surgery. It's really hard. I don't think we should bother, says Mark Zuckerberg. You go and speak to a brain surgeon. So we as an industry, the answer to your question is that we as an industry are more than capable of deciding what is credible and what isn't in our industry, okay? And so we'll be in charge of that. And I don't think we should be ashamed of that in the same way as we shouldn't be ashamed about making the tough decisions we make about what we publish. We're accountable, and we're happy to be accountable, and we don't need to listen to their nonsense. if that's not too fierce. Yeah.
I want to just jump in on one thing, because the Michener Awards, which have been around for 50 years, as the book will tell you, has judged what is in the public interest and what isn't every year, and that's how the award is given. But I've always found that a bit of a red herring, that governments throw up and others saying, well, who's going to judge it? I think, who was it, Potter Stewart, the Supreme Court Justice, who said, I can't define obscenity, but I know it when I see it. I think it's plainer than we wrap ourselves in knots over this, and we don't need to. It's quite clear what's news versus what's advertorial, what's otherwise. So I don't want to get hung up on that as an industry as we look for solutions.
100%. And again, look, I just don't want to